welcome back to this week's What's for Dinner. This week I have some more super easy and delicious meals to share with you. They're all very budget friendly and I think they're meals that your whole family is going to love. So definitely stay tuned until the end if you don't want to miss out on all of these meal ideas. If you are new here, I would love to have you, so don't forget to hit that little subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and let's go ahead and get into the meals for the week. So for this first night, I ended up making some chicken fajitas. These were super delicious and also very easy to throw together. So I'm just starting off by getting my seasoning all mixed up and ready to go. So in this little dish, I have 1 tablespoon of chili powder, half a tablespoon of paprika, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder, as well as ground cumin. And then you're also going to want to add in 1/8 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, 1 teaspoon of sugar, and then about half a teaspoon of salt. And then you're just gonna mix all of that together. So for the meat in this recipe, I am using some chicken breast. It's what I had on hand and it is also what the recipe called for. But of course you could try to substitute something else. You could do steak, you could do pork. You could definitely play around with the meat in this recipe and I think it would turn out really good. But I just cut up my 2 chicken breasts and I just cut them into some like long, thin strips, and that seemed to work really well. So obviously, since we are making fajitas, you're going to need quite a few peppers for this one. So I just used my tricolor pack that I get every single week, and I had a yellow, a red, as well as an orange pepper, and it worked perfect for this recipe. I just cut all of them into some long, thin strips. I also forgot to cut up an onion. I did end up adding that probably like 1/3 of the way through the cooking time. I completely forgot to cut it up. It was a part of the recipe, I just forgot to actually cut it up. But you're gonna cut all of the peppers into long, thin strips, as well as the onion. So I just threw everything right onto my baking sheet. You could go ahead and line this with aluminum foil if you want to make it super easy and you don't want anything to stick. And then I just drizzled everything with a little bit of vegetable oil, probably like a couple tablespoons if I had to guess. And then I just took that seasoning that I mixed up earlier, sprinkled that right on top, and then I'm just gonna toss all of this together. You do want to make sure that everything is really well coated in the mixture. So I did not actually put in the cayenne pepper in this recipe. I wasn't wanting it to be too spicy for my kids, and my husband thought I could maybe add the cayenne next time. So if you want a little bit of spice in yours, definitely add the cayenne pepper. But I made it without and I still thought they were really good, definitely very mild for kids. So if you don't want it to be too spicy for your kids, go ahead and skip the cayenne pepper on this one. These fajitas are going to get baked in a 400-degree oven for about 35 to 40 minutes. You just want to make sure that all of your vegetables are nice and soft and that your chicken is cooked all the way through. When it came to serving these up, I just served them on plain flour tortillas. You could go ahead and brown them if you want, but I'm kind of lazy and I just did not do that. So I just served the chicken with the peppers, and then I did also decide to top ours with some cheese just because we love cheese. I know that's not really typical for fajitas, but it definitely was super delicious. And of course, we also had to pair it with some sour cream. This was honestly probably my favorite meal for the week. I thought it was super delicious, and you guys know I love any sort of Mexican food. So for the next night, I actually made a homemade spaghetti sauce. I had some fresh tomatoes that needed to be used up, so I figured that would be good. So here I'm just throwing my tomatoes into a pot of boiling water. I'm letting them boil for just about a minute or so until those skins start to kind of peel back. And then you're just gonna take the tomatoes out, throw them into an ice water bath, and that's going to kind of flash the skins right off the tomatoes, make them super easy to peel. I did also have some cherry tomatoes to use. These were also from the garden, which is not typical of what I would put into a pasta sauce, but I did have some that needed to be used up, so I figured it would just be a great time to use those up as well. So once all of the blanching is done and your tomatoes have been sitting in the ice water, the skin should peel right off of your tomatoes. I know blanching might seem a little bit intimidating, but it's honestly super easy. It just takes a few minutes and it really makes a difference. You can make spaghetti sauce with skins on your tomatoes, but I definitely prefer to not have the skins on mine if I have a choice. So I do like to take the extra couple minutes and just blanch all the tomatoes, get the skins off, and then I will just like roughly chop them up, and these are just gonna get thrown right into the crock pot. This is also the point where you can pull out some seeds if you like. Make sure all of the cores are out. I do core my tomatoes and I do like kind of slice on the edges before I throw them into the water to be blanched. But at this point, I'm just kind of taking out some of the extra seeds, and if there's any core in there, I will make sure that that is out as well. And then all of these tomatoes are just gonna get thrown right into my crock pot. This was actually my first time blanching cherry tomatoes, so I wasn't sure how these skins would actually come off, but they were super easy. They just slid right off of the tomato, so no issues here. If you have extra tomatoes to use up, definitely consider making a sauce because it really does turn out super delicious with tons of flavor. So here are all of the tomatoes in the crock pot, and I did decide to add a few cans of diced tomatoes in there just to kind of bulk it up a bit. I wanted to have a really large batch of sauce, so I added in about 4 cans of tomatoes. I'm also adding in a couple really big scoops of minced garlic. You guys know I really love garlic. And then I did also add in 1 onion that's chopped up, and I did saute it in some olive oil. I actually would have normally added a little bit more onion than this, but this is all that I had on hand. And then as far as seasonings, I'm adding in some basil. I'm also adding in some oregano, some garlic powder. I did not have very much left, but I added in what I had on hand. You're also going to want some onion powder, as well as quite a bit of Italian seasoning. I definitely like a lot of that Italian flavor in my sauce. And then I did add in just a little bit of parsley. And then of course, salt and pepper to taste. I do add a little bit more later on as well. And then just a little bit of sugar to cut some of that acidity. Go ahead and stir all of this together. And you're gonna end up cooking this low and slow for about 8 hours. So after your sauce has been simmering all day, your house is going to smell absolutely delicious. I'm just throwing it into my blender. You could also use an immersion blender for this if you have one. Just use that right in your crock pot. It will be super easy, but unfortunately I do not have one of those, so I'm just using my Ninja blender, which also works super great. And this is where you can make it really blended, or you can leave it a little bit on the chunkier side. I did decide to blend mine pretty well blended up just because I wanted it really smooth for my kids. Now I'm just adding that right back into my crock pot. I do like to let it simmer for another maybe 30 minutes or so. And this is where I will add in all of my extra seasonings. So I do add in quite a bit of salt and pepper, as well as quite a bit of sugar. I added in some red chili flakes, and I'm just doing all of that to taste. Just be aware that you're probably going to want to add quite a bit of salt and quite a bit of sugar because tomatoes are very acidic. So in my pan here, I just have 1 pound of lean ground beef. It's just cooked up and ready to go, and I'm just ladling in some of my sauce. I definitely did not add the full crock pot of sauce. That would have been way too much. I just added in a little bit, and then I did end up freezing the rest of the sauce. I did add some extra seasonings to this, and then I just served it over some pasta with some green beans on the side, and it was a super delicious dinner. For the next night, I actually repurposed some leftovers to make some lasagna soup. This was another really good meal this week that we made. So I just have some olive oil heated up in my pan here, and then about half of a yellow onion, and I'm just sauteing that up until the onions are translucent in color. And then I'm adding in some garlic and sauteing that for maybe like 30 seconds or so, just until the garlic is nice and fragrant. And then I actually had some of this leftover spaghetti sauce from the night before. It really was not very much, but it definitely made this meal stretch and made the meat go a lot farther, and it really was not lacking anything. I did also add in a can of diced tomatoes. These are just regular ones. And then I added in 1.5 cups of chicken broth. For seasonings in this recipe, I added in quite a bit of oregano, Italian seasoning, basil, garlic powder, onion powder, as well as some parsley. And then of course I did also add in some salt and pepper to taste, as well as a little bit of sugar to cut the acidity from the tomatoes. That's definitely a little tip that works really well. And then I just brought this up to a boil. Once it was boiling, that is when I went ahead and added in my broken up lasagna noodles. I would say added probably about 1/3 of a box of lasagna noodles, maybe 1/2 of a box. Just see what you think. You can add a little bit more or a little bit less. Once those noodles were completely cooked through, I added in maybe about 1 cup of mozzarella cheese, a little bit of Parmesan, and then I just stirred all of this together. I did have the heat turned off at this point, and I just let it all melt together. And to pair with this lasagna soup, I made my all-time favorite Italian bread. I will link this recipe below for you guys, and I have made it in a past What's for Dinner, so I will link that as well if you want to see exactly how I made it. But you guys, I promise you it is the best Italian bread recipe ever. The recipe does not call for putting melted butter on top, but I think it makes it even better. So I definitely recommend you guys trying out this recipe. It's super easy to make, and it's also a very budget-friendly bread to make. It's very, very basic ingredients. So if you are looking for a good recipe, this is definitely a super delicious bread recipe to pair with any of your favorite dinners. So this is what the lasagna soup ended up looking like. I did top it with some Parmesan and some parsley, and then I just served it with the bread and the broccoli, and this was honestly a super delicious meal that I will definitely be making again. For this next meal, I don't have a complete recipe, but I figured I would share it with you guys anyway. I just made some quinoa bowls. So I basically just cooked some quinoa in some chicken broth. Once that was all done, I went ahead and mixed it in with some cooked ground beef, some diced tomatoes, as well as some taco seasoning. And then I just served this up like a taco salad. So I added on some lettuce, some peppers, some cheese. I added on some salsa, some sour cream, and then I did also crush up a tortilla shell. This is a super, super delicious meal, and it's also something that you can throw in your freezer, which is exactly what I did on this night. This was a meal that I just pulled out of the freezer that I had ready to go. Alright guys, that is going to wrap up this week of What's for Dinner. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Hit that little subscribe button if you have not already. I do post these new What's for Dinner videos every single Sunday, so if you don't want to miss out, make sure you are subscribed. But that is going to be it for today's video. I will see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.
As a young girl, it feels we're mine. We played hide and seek for hours, raised our shadows among the pines. So offshore, playful and free, without a care.